Hello and welcome. We begin with the major political drama unfolding in Kenya. An impeachment campaign against President William Ruto's deputy is gaining momentum. Kenya, for the very first time, could see a deputy president being impeached. Now, this comes amidst tensions within Kenya's ruling party. A rift between President Ruto and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, this is now out in the open. And it further accentuates the political tensions in the East African nation that erupted after the recent deadly anti-government protests. Kenyan Senate, which is the upper house of parliament, has begun proceedings on the impeachment motion against the deputy president. Fast-tracking the process, the matter was forwarded to the Senate just a day after Kenya's National Assembly, which is the lower house, in a historic move, overwhelmingly voted in favour of the impeachment motion. High drama unfolded in the National Assembly yesterday. Inside Parliament, lawmakers engaged in a heated argument over the bid to oust the deputy president. These discussions were almost a day long. Now, outside the Parliament, cannons and tear gas. This, as in the past few days, there have been clashes between Ruto and his deputy's supporters. Now, Ruto's allies approved the impeachment motion with a majority vote. 282 MPs in the 349-member National Assembly voted in favour, way ahead of the two-thirds required. For the votes, there were 44 votes against and 1 abstention. Now, the impeachment motion accuses the deputy president of 11 charges, including insubordination, undermining the government, practising ethnically divisive politics, and also being involved in the recent anti-government protests, which turned out to be a major challenge for the Ruto administration.
Order, members, order. Members, the results of the division on the motion are as follows. Abstentions, 1. The noes, 44. The ayes, 281. So the ayes have it.
The deputy president was also present in Parliament. He defended himself against the several charges. He denied any wrongdoing and said he will not back down and will fight to the end.
I have no intention whatsoever to resign from this job. I'll fight to the end. I have tremendous respect for our judiciary and the professional judges of the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. And in the professional manner, they have handled serious issues affecting Kenya.
While Ruto has not yet commented publicly on the impeachment proceedings, it is believed the impeachment bid is a culmination of the fallout with his deputy. 59-year-old Gachagua was handpicked by Ruto in 2022 after his win. He had weathered corruption scandals and links to the country's former authoritarian to secure the country's second top job. Now, Gachagua had belonged to a vote-rich Mount Kenya region, and his campaign helped Ruto to gain significant votes to win the presidential election. But in recent weeks, he has complained of being politically sidelined. He has also been absent from accompanying his boss when he travels abroad or returns. So what has changed now? Now, seemingly everything is rooted in Kenya's recent anti-government protests that started against the proposed tax hikes but snowballed into a larger campaign against Ruto. At least 50 people died in the protests, and the authorities were accused of mishandling the protesters. Ruto had to take some major steps to appease the public in the aftermath, like completely scrapping the financial bill and sacking his entire cabinet. Ruto appointed some opposition members in his new government, and that has reportedly shifted attention from the deputy. Gachaguahas says that he is now isolated. Gachagua is also accused of being involved in the protests. Last month, many lawmakers allied with the deputy president were summoned by police on accusations of funding the protests. Now, the motion against Gachagua also lists accusations that he amassed assets worth $40 million in 2 years, even as he had an annual salary of $93,000. But Gachagua, who was a former businessman, says that all his assets are legitimate. As per reports, Kenya's Interior Minister, Kindiki, is now being assigned some of the Deputy President's duties. The Interior Minister also hails from Mount Kenya and could be Ruto's next point man in the vote-rich region. Now, the Senate, meanwhile, has 10 days to wrap up the proceedings and to make a decision on the motion. It will debate on the matter next week. If they vote in favour, what implications could it have on Kenyan politics? And what really has triggered Kenyan lawmakers to launch this unprecedented impeachment motion? Now, for more on this, we have with us Stella Agara, a governance and security analyst who is joining us live from Nairobi. Thank you for being with us, Stella.
Thank you for having me.
Now, amid the rift between Kenya's president and his deputy, Kenyan lawmakers are voting to impeach the deputy president, this on charges of stirring ethnic hatred and anti-government protests. Can you take us through the main allegations against the deputy president, Gachagua, that led to the impeachment vote?
Thank you very much. I think for the viewers' benefit, I'm just going to give a summary of what the allegations are. He has been accused of going against Article 10 of the Constitution, which speaks on national values, and basically going against some of those national values that are espoused in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. He has also been accused on issues of arrogance towards his colleagues in the National Assembly, but also towards the office of the president, his boss. He has also been accused of insubordination. Insubordination towards the president. The nature of the structure of the office of the deputy president in Kenya is such that he deputizes the president. And so he can only act or at the behest of the president. And of course, he's at the service of the president, which is different compared to what we used to have before. A vice president who would then have a mandate of his own that he would be able to carry out without necessarily having to refer to anyone. He has been accused of issues of integrity. There are a raft of examples that have been given of situations where he was found actually to have acted out of integrity, and majority of those are cases of either bribing, inducements, trying to influence public tenders so that his family or himself can be able to access the public tenders. And so in a nutshell, that's what really he has been accused of. But that is also what he's being accused of in the surface. And underneath, of course, there are bigger things like the succession towards the 2027 election in Kenya and the question of the leadership of his community, because it's a big voting bloc in the country.
Right. And Stella, how does the impeachment process work in Kenya? What are the next steps following the National Assembly vote?
Following the National Assembly vote, the Speaker has a responsibility to notify the Speaker of the Senate in about 2 days of the decision that has been made by the National Assembly. And then the Speaker of the Senate is going to then have the responsibility to ensure that then he activates a process to have the debate held in the National Assembly and a voting process held in the National Assembly. This has to happen within the next 7 days, starting today. Or at least starting the point of notification. Once they have engaged in the debate, the Senate will also be required to vote. And their vote could either reinforce the vote by the National Assembly or actually find that the DP can still be allowed to remain in office. If that happens, then we face a different conversation. But in the event that they vote to affirm the vote by the National Assembly, then the DP will stand impeached, and a process would have to be started to then replace him and get a different deputy president to run for the remainder of the term.
Right. And what are the potential political ramifications of this impeachment for President William Ruto's administration?
I think there are a number of ramifications to his administration. Number one is that the more the deputy president is being pushed to the wall, the more he's losing caution. In between the pressers he did 3 days ago and the conversations that he's having now, he has become a lot more willing to disclose a lot of the corruption in government, a lot of the abuses of power in government, and I think it will eventually not work for the government when he actually comes out to speak truthfully about what has been happening. He had a responsibility to protect the government, but now, I mean, if he's out, then what responsibility does he have? There are also other implications in the sense that Kenyans have just walked out of a very, very tumultuous season of protests and demanding certain changes in government. So focusing on removing someone from the office instead of focusing on actually the development issues that Kenyans brought is really, really waning the confidence of Kenyans in the government and its ability to deliver, but also its ability to stick together in order to do the task that they're supposed to be doing. They will be left with a lot of work to do to convince Kenyans that they're still properly constituted to deliver for Kenyans.
And finally, how might this historic impeachment impact Kenya's political landscape with a focus on public trust in the government?
Indeed, like I've mentioned, there are a number of issues that are going to arise. First, the public is not going to have confidence in the government's stability, because if there have been issues between the president and the deputy president, then citizens must start asking themselves questions about whether this government is properly constituted. The second one has to do with the fact that there are members of parliament who are not expected to vote against the president and the deputy president, and they did vote against him. So a number of them have experienced backlash in their constituency. They have had the citizens telling them, if you're going to vote against the deputy president, then you can't come back here to claim that you have mandate to continue to lead us. So some of them will face a lot of legitimacy issues, of which of course interferes with their role of representation. There is also the question of public confidence in the cohesion around the nation, because if you have studied the conversation properly, there are a lot of tribal undertones. Kenya has been struggling with tribalism for a very long time. It is the main instrument that is actually applied when dividing power, when dividing resources. And so there are certain communities, especially after the full disclosure of the deputy president, who are feeling like maybe they don't belong.
Right.
Like there are other people who own the stake in the country more than others. And so for those people, it should take a lot of convincing to convince them that then maybe this government is representative of them. The government will be hard-pressed to convince Kenyans and bring back confidence in Kenyans on their ability to deliver.
Right.
And they're starting from a very low baseline as well.
Stella, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa, for your valued insights. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained, every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.